She was just another tired passenger on Flight 447 to Miami. Elena Sofia Martinez curled up in row 6 with her head against the window, trying to escape the nightmares that followed her from her small apartment in Denver, where she worked quietly as a federal prosecutor handling white-collar crime cases that never seemed to touch the real criminals who operated behind layers of corporate protection and government connections. But when heavy boots thundered down the aisle and Navy SEALs in full tactical gear stormed aboard to arrest a suspected arms dealer, they froze mid-step as their eyes locked onto her face, recognizing not their target, but something far more shocking. The legendary Phoenix, the DEA undercover agent who had once infiltrated the deadliest cartel in South America and was supposedly killed in a helicopter crash 3 years ago. In that electric moment of recognition, every passenger held their breath, because Elena realized her carefully constructed new life was about to shatter, and the war she thought she'd left behind in the jungles of Colombia had just found her at 35,000 feet. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena's fingers gripped the armrest as consciousness slowly returned, the familiar weight of exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Through the small airplane window, clouds drifted past in endless white formations, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine they were the snow-capped mountains of Colorado, where autumn leaves would be turning golden red about now, where life moved at the pace of morning coffee and legal briefs, rather than the relentless tick of trauma that never quite left her alone. The gentle hum of the aircraft engines had lulled her into the first peaceful sleep she'd managed in weeks, ever since the nightmares had started coming back stronger, ever since she'd begun waking up in cold sweats with the taste of jungle humidity in her mouth and the echo of gunfire that existed only in her memory. She shifted slightly in seat 6A, her body instinctively seeking the window because it offered an escape route, a habit drilled into her from years of undercover training that she couldn't quite shake, even though she'd traded her DEA badge for the simple clothes of a federal prosecutor. Elena Sofia Martinez, aged 29, officially employed by the Denver District Attorney's Office as a white-collar crime specialist. Unofficially, the woman who helped put corrupt businessmen behind bars, while her own past remained carefully buried beneath a surface of professional competence and genuine dedication to justice. The other passengers around her seemed lost in their own worlds. Business travelers typing on laptops, families planning their Miami vacations, elderly couples sharing quiet conversations, and none of them had any idea that the woman sleeping peacefully in row 6 had once been one of the most successful undercover agents in DEA history. Dr. Marcus Webb, seated 3 rows ahead in seat 3D, glanced back at Elena with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to reading people's stories in their posture and expressions. As a forensic psychiatrist flying to Miami for a conference on criminal psychology, he'd developed an instinct for recognizing when someone carried invisible wounds. And something about the young woman by the window suggested depths of experience that didn't match her apparent age. Dr. Webb returned to his case files, but his mind wandered to the way Elena held herself, even in sleep, as though ready to spring into action at the first sign of danger. In the galley near the front of the plane, flight attendant Rachel Kim finished organizing the beverage cart and checked her watch. 8 years as a flight attendant had given her an appreciation for the quiet moments during flights, especially after her earlier career as an Air Force intelligence officer had taught her that peace was always temporary. Something about today felt different, though. A tension in the air that had nothing to do with turbulence or difficult passengers. She'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before transitioning to civilian life, and her instincts still picked up on subtle changes in atmosphere that others might miss. Captain Jennifer Hayes's voice crackled over the intercom with professional warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're currently cruising at 37,000 feet with clear skies ahead. We expect to arrive at Miami International Airport approximately 20 minutes ahead of schedule. Flight attendants, please prepare for beverage service." The routine announcement provided a comforting backdrop of normality, though Captain Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that air traffic control had been unusually cryptic during their last communication. Detective Luis Rodriguez, off-duty and dressed in casual clothes, occupied seat 14C and tried to enjoy what was supposed to be a vacation. 15 years with the Miami Police Department had earned him a break, but his cop instincts never truly switched off. He noticed the nervous energy of a passenger in seat 18F who kept checking his phone and looking toward the cockpit, behavior that would have warranted closer attention under normal circumstances. But this was supposed to be his time to relax, to visit his family in Miami and forget about criminal behavior for a few days. Jennifer Walsh juggled her purse, carry-on bag, and 6-year-old son Tyler while trying to keep the little boy entertained with coloring books and quiet games. Single motherhood meant mastering the art of traveling alone with a child, and flights always presented unique challenges. Tyler had been good during takeoff, but restlessness was setting in now that the novelty had worn off. "Mommy, are we almost there?" Tyler whispered, and Jennifer smiled despite her own travel fatigue. "Soon, sweetheart. Why don't you color the airplane we started?"
The businessman in seat 18F, who had caught Detective Rodriguez's attention, was actually David Chen, a government contractor with legitimate business in Miami, but enough nervous energy to make anyone suspicious. His frequent phone checking stemmed from anxiety about an important presentation, not criminal activity, though his fidgeting had already put several passengers on edge. The elderly woman beside him, Margaret Foster, had started reading her book with more concentrated attention than usual, a sure sign that something in the cabin's atmosphere had unsettled her. Elena stirred slightly as her subconscious registered a change in the aircraft's sounds. Years of sleeping in hostile territory had trained her to wake at the slightest variation in her environment, and something was different now. The normal conversation murmur seemed muted, replaced by an undercurrent of tension she couldn't quite identify. Her eyes remained closed, but her breathing pattern shifted as her body prepared for whatever had triggered her internal warning system. The first sign of disruption came from the cockpit, where Captain Hayes received an urgent communication that made her exchange a sharp glance with First Officer Michael Santos. The message was brief and coded, but its meaning was unmistakable. Federal agents were requesting permission to board the aircraft for an emergency arrest. The target was described as a former federal agent with specialized training, someone who could pose a significant threat to passenger safety if cornered. Captain Hayes's hand moved instinctively toward his concealed weapon as he prepared for what could become a volatile situation. The tension in the air became palpable when the aircraft's intercom crackled to life with an announcement that deviated from standard flight procedures. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We have received instructions from federal authorities to maintain our current altitude and heading while we accommodate some additional passengers. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. Thank you for your cooperation." The unusual nature of the announcement sent ripples of unease throughout the cabin, with passengers exchanging worried glances and hushed conversations. Elena's eyes snapped open at the words "federal authorities," her training immediately recognizing the coded language that meant law enforcement was about to board the aircraft. Her heart rate accelerated as she processed the implications, wondering if her carefully constructed identity had somehow been compromised. For 3 years she had lived quietly in Denver, working with prosecutors and trying to heal from her own invisible wounds. The idea that her past might have caught up with her sent ice through her veins.
The sound that would change everything began as a low rumble outside the aircraft, growing louder until it became unmistakable. The approaching roar of military helicopters. Passengers pressed their faces to windows, trying to see what was happening, while nervous chatter filled the cabin. Children began to cry, sensing their parents' anxiety, and the flight attendants moved quickly to provide reassurance, while clearly struggling with their own uncertainty about the situation. Elena forced herself to remain calm, though every muscle in her body was coiled for action. She had survived too much to panic now, but the approaching sound of helicopters brought back memories she had spent years trying to suppress. The last time she had heard that particular engine signature, she had been lying wounded in the Colombian jungle, watching her cover get blown, while cartel assassins closed in on her position. Then came the metallic clanging of equipment making contact with the aircraft's exterior, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots moving across the fuselage. The passengers who could see outside watched in amazement and terror as dark figures rappelled from helicopters onto their commercial airliner, moving with the precision and purpose of elite military operatives. The impossible was happening. Their routine flight had become the target of what appeared to be a military operation. The cabin door burst open with a force that sent several passengers ducking for cover, and suddenly the narrow aisle filled with figures in full tactical gear. Navy SEALs moved through the aircraft with practiced efficiency, their weapons lowered but ready, their movements coordinated in a way that spoke of countless similar operations. The contrast between their military bearing and the civilian environment of the aircraft created a surreal atmosphere of controlled chaos. Commander Ryan Mitchell led the team, his eyes scanning the passenger manifest in his hand, while simultaneously assessing potential threats. Behind him, Petty Officer Sarah Collins and Chief Petty Officer Mark Thompson moved to secure the rear of the aircraft, while Sergeant Lisa Martinez positioned herself near the middle section. Their target was supposed to be a dangerous arms dealer, someone who had evaded capture for months and posed a significant threat to national security. But as Commander Mitchell's eyes swept across the passengers, searching for the face that matched their intelligence briefing, his gaze locked onto row 6, and everything stopped. The woman by the window, the one who had been sleeping peacefully moments before, looked exactly like someone he had seen before, someone who was supposed to be dead. His hand moved automatically to signal his team to hold position as recognition dawned like lightning. Elena Sofia Martinez sat perfectly still, her eyes meeting those of the Navy SEAL commander with the calm acceptance of someone who had always known this moment would come. She didn't try to run or hide or protest her innocence. Instead, she simply waited, her hands visible and her posture non-threatening, while her mind raced through the possible reasons why elite military operatives had tracked her down on a commercial airliner. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was actually only seconds, every passenger in the cabin holding their breath as they witnessed the unexpected standoff between the sleeping woman and the heavily armed team that had boarded their plane. And in that moment of electric tension, Elena realized that her 3 years of peaceful anonymity in Denver had come to an abrupt end, and whatever happened next would determine whether she could ever go home again. Commander Mitchell's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of shock and disbelief. "Elena Sofia Martinez?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and every passenger leaned forward to hear her response, though none of them could have imagined that they were witnessing the moment when a dead federal agent came back to life. Telling and preparing the story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Elena's voice carried the steady confidence of someone who had faced death before and found it less frightening than most people imagined. "That depends on who's asking, Commander." Her words sliced through the cabin's tension with surgical precision, and she watched Commander Mitchell's expression shift from shock to something approaching professional respect. The other SEALs maintained their positions, but their weapons had unconsciously lowered, creating a strange tableau of military recognition rather than arrest. Petty Officer Sarah Collins spoke first, her voice thick with emotion that years of tactical training couldn't quite suppress. "Ma'am, we were told you died in Operation Desert Phoenix. Your sacrifice saved my entire squad during the Medellin extraction." The admission hung in the air like a confession, and suddenly the true nature of this encounter began to crystallize for everyone watching. These weren't soldiers come to arrest a fugitive. They were operatives, face to face with someone they believed had died saving their lives. Dr. Marcus Webb found himself leaning forward despite the obvious danger, his psychiatric training automatically assessing the body language of everyone involved. Something about this interaction suggested layers of deception that went far beyond a simple case of mistaken identity. The way the woman spoke to the soldiers indicated familiarity with military protocols, while their reaction suggested she held a position of considerable respect in their hierarchy. Detective Luis Rodriguez's vacation mindset evaporated completely as his law enforcement instinct kicked into high gear. The conversation he was witnessing had the hallmarks of a conspiracy, and his experience with complex criminal cases told him that the surface explanation rarely reflected the deeper truth.
Their target was supposed to be a dangerous arms dealer, someone who had evaded capture for months and posed a significant threat to national security. But as Commander Mitchell's eyes swept across the passengers, searching for the face that matched their intelligence briefing, his gaze locked onto row 6, and everything stopped. The woman by the window, the one who had been sleeping peacefully moments before, looked exactly like someone he had seen before, someone who was supposed to be dead. His hand moved automatically to signal his team to hold position as recognition dawned like lightning. Elena Sofia Martinez sat perfectly still, her eyes meeting those of the Navy SEAL commander with the calm acceptance of someone who had always known this moment would come. She didn't try to run or hide or protest her innocence. Instead, she simply waited, her hands visible and her posture non-threatening, while her mind raced through the possible reasons why elite military operatives had tracked her down on a commercial airliner. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was actually only seconds, every passenger in the cabin holding their breath as they witnessed the unexpected standoff between the sleeping woman and the heavily armed team that had boarded their plane. And in that moment of electric tension, Elena realized that her 3 years of peaceful anonymity in Denver had come to an abrupt end, and whatever happened next would determine whether she could ever go home again. Commander Mitchell's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of shock and disbelief. "Elena Sofia Martinez." The question hung in the air like a challenge, and every passenger leaned forward to hear her response, though none of them could have imagined that they were witnessing the moment when a dead federal agent came back to life. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Elena's voice carried the steady confidence of someone who had faced death before and found it less frightening than most people imagined. "That depends on who's asking, Commander." Her words sliced through the cabin's tension with surgical precision, and she watched Commander Mitchell's expression shift from shock to something approaching professional respect. The other SEALs maintained their positions, but their weapons had unconsciously lowered, creating a strange tableau of military recognition rather than arrest. Petty Officer Sarah Collins spoke first, her voice thick with emotion that years of tactical training couldn't quite suppress. "Ma'am, we were told you died in Operation Desert Phoenix. Your sacrifice saved my entire squad during the Medellin extraction." The admission hung in the air like a confession, and suddenly the true nature of this encounter began to crystallize for everyone watching. These weren't soldiers come to arrest a fugitive. They were operatives face to face with someone they believed had died, saving their lives. Chief Petty Officer Mark Thompson stepped forward, his demolitions expertise evident in the way he processed information rapidly. The mission briefing said we were apprehending an arms dealer named Victor Reyes, traveling with false documents. But you, he paused, struggling with the impossibility of seeing someone supposedly killed in action, sitting calmly in an airplane seat. Elena shifted position slightly, her movements economical and controlled. Victor Reyes, she repeated the name with the kind of bitter recognition that spoke of personal history. Now that's a name I haven't heard in a while. Tell me, Commander, who exactly sent you that briefing? Her question carried implications that sent cold fingers of realization crawling up Commander Mitchell's spine. Dr. Marcus Webb found himself leaning forward despite the obvious danger, his psychiatric training automatically assessing the body language of everyone involved. Something about this interaction suggested layers of deception that went beyond a simple case of mistaken identity. The way the woman spoke to the soldiers indicated familiarity with military protocols, while their reaction suggested she held a position of considerable respect in their hierarchy. Detective Luis Rodriguez's vacation mindset evaporated completely as his law enforcement instincts kicked into high gear. The conversation he was witnessing had the hallmarks of a conspiracy, and his experience with complex criminal cases told him that his hand moved instinctively to where his service weapon would normally rest before remembering he was traveling unarmed on what was supposed to be a peaceful vacation. Sergeant Lisa Martinez, the team's medic, studied Elena with a clinical eye of someone trained to assess battlefield casualties. The report said you were killed by cartel assassins while providing cover for our extraction. We found blood, gear fragments, everything that was supposed to indicate my death, because someone needed the Phoenix to disappear permanently. Her use of her old call sign sent visible shudders through the SEAL team, confirming what they had begun to suspect. The woman they were looking at was indeed the legendary undercover agent who had become mythical among special operations units. Commander Mitchell's tactical radio crackled to life, the voice on the other end crisp with authority. "Bravo team, report status on target acquisition." The transmission cut through the emotional reunion like a knife, reminding everyone that this operation was being monitored by unseen commanders who expected results. Elena's eyes hardened as she heard the radio transmission. "Commander, before you respond to that, ask yourself why your mission briefing contained the alias of a man who was supposed to have died in the same helicopter crash that allegedly killed me." Her words carried the weight of someone who had spent 3 years piecing together fragments of truth from a web of official lies. Rachel Kim, still positioned near the galley, found her Air Force intelligence training creating tactical assessments of the situation despite her civilian status. The familiarity between the soldiers and the passenger suggested this was not a standard arrest, while the passenger's demeanor indicated someone comfortable with military procedures and combat situations. Something about the entire scenario felt orchestrated in ways that extended beyond normal law enforcement operations. Jennifer Walsh instinctively pulled her son Tyler closer, trying to shield the child from whatever was unfolding around them. But Tyler's 6-year-old eyes were wide with curiosity rather than fear, fascinated by the soldiers and the drama playing out in their airplane. "Mommy, why do the soldiers know that lady?" he whispered, and Jennifer realized she had no answer that would make sense to anyone. Mark Thompson's demolitions equipment began registering encrypted signals that shouldn't have existed on a civilian aircraft. His technical training immediately recognized the signatures of advanced surveillance systems, suggesting that Flight 447 had been under electronic monitoring from the moment it took off. "Commander, we've got active surveillance protocols running that aren't in our mission parameters." The realization that their operation might be compromised sent immediate alerts through the SEAL team's training protocols. Commander Mitchell made a command decision that reflected years of experience in situations where the mission briefing didn't match the field reality. "Stand down, weapons secure," he ordered his team, then turned back to Elena. "Ma'am, we need to talk privately."
Elena stood with fluid grace that spoke of maintained physical conditioning despite her civilian cover. "I think we're past the point of private conversations, Commander. These passengers are already involved whether we like it or not." Her gesture encompassed the entire cabin, where dozens of civilians sat witnessing an interaction that was clearly beyond their understanding, but obviously significant. Federal Judge Patricia Blackwood, seated in first class and traveling under diplomatic immunity, felt her pulse quicken as she recognized the developing situation. Her connection to the cartel money laundering operations that had orchestrated Elena's supposed death made her acutely aware of the implications if the DEA agent had survived and retained evidence of their operations. Her hand moved to her secure phone, prepared to make calls that would activate contingency plans years in the making.
Agent David Sterling, traveling incognito in seat 22D, activated his CIA communication protocols while maintaining his cover as an ordinary passenger. His investigation into cartel infiltration of federal agencies had led him to suspect that several officially dead operatives might actually be alive and in hiding. The scene unfolding before him suggested that one of those operatives had just been discovered. "The helicopter crash that was supposed to kill me was no accident," Elena continued, her voice carrying the steady cadence of someone delivering a briefing. "Victor Reyes was the cartel's inside man responsible for compromising federal operations. His death was faked to eliminate him as a witness, just like mine was faked to eliminate me as someone who knew too much about cartel infiltration of federal agencies." The accusation sent shockwaves through the SEAL team's understanding of their mission. Sarah Collins's face darkened with rage as she processed the implications of being used as pawns in a cover-up operation. "Are you telling us that our commanding officer sent us to arrest a dead man on intelligence provided by the people who tried to kill you?" Elena nodded grimly. "Your commanding officers probably don't know the full scope of what's happening. The orders came through channels that have been compromised for years by cartel money and corrupt federal officials." Her explanation began to paint a picture of systemic corruption that extended far beyond a single operation. Captain Jennifer Hayes's voice crackled over the intercom with barely controlled tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received updated instructions from Air Traffic Control. We'll be making an unscheduled landing at a federal facility for passenger security reasons. Please remain seated and follow all crew instructions." The announcement confirmed that forces beyond the aircraft were actively manipulating their situation. The elderly passenger, Margaret Foster, whose reading had become increasingly agitated, suddenly spoke with surprising clarity. "Young lady, my late husband was Agent Theodore Foster, DEA, and he used to talk about operations that officially never happened. Whatever you know, there are people who will kill to keep it secret." Her words carried the authority of someone who had spent decades as an agent's wife, learning to read between the lines of official stories. Elena's attention shifted to the older woman with genuine surprise. "Agent Foster was my training supervisor at Quantico. He was one of the few honest officers who questioned the official story about Operation Desert Phoenix." The connection between past and present began creating new alliances in the most unlikely circumstances. Victor Daniels, traveling under false identification in seat 20B, realized his cover might be compromised as the conversation revealed knowledge that threatened his employer's interests. His cartel contractor credentials included authorization for extreme measures to protect operational security, and the woman discussing classified operations represented an immediate threat that required neutralization. Mark Thompson's electronic surveillance detected encrypted communication spikes that indicated multiple parties were monitoring their conversation in real time. "Commander, we've got external parties actively listening to everything being said. This conversation is being transmitted to unknown recipients." His warning sent immediate tactical alerts through the team's protocols.
Detective Rodriguez stood slowly, his civilian clothes and off-duty status doing nothing to diminish the authority in his voice. "This is Detective Luis Rodriguez, Miami Police Department. I'm declaring this aircraft a crime scene under federal jurisdiction until we can sort out what's actually happening here." His intervention added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Judge Blackwood's secure phone connected her to a network of officials who had spent years protecting their involvement in cartel money laundering operations. "The package has been located and is actively compromising security," she whispered into the device. "Authorization requested for extreme containment measures." Her words set in motion responses that would turn Flight 447 into a battlefield. Elena heard enough of the judge's conversation to understand that immediate action was required. "Commander Mitchell, your team needs to decide right now whether you're going to follow orders from people who used you as unwitting accomplices or whether you're going to help me expose the truth about operations that got good agents killed for cartel profits." Her challenge forced an immediate decision that would determine the fate of everyone on the aircraft. The SEAL team's training had prepared them for many scenarios, but being caught between conflicting loyalties while surrounded by innocent civilians was not among them. Commander Mitchell looked at his team, then at Elena, then at the passengers who were depending on all of them to make the right choice in an impossible situation. The decision would reshape everything that followed, and Elena realized that Flight 447 had become ground zero for a confrontation that would determine whether the truth about cartel infiltration could survive or whether corrupt forces would succeed in burying the evidence along with everyone who had witnessed it.
She was sleeping lightly in row 6 until Navy SEALs surrounded her seat and froze. Part 2. Commander Mitchell's decision crystallized with the sharp clarity that separated elite soldiers from ordinary ones. Collins, Thompson, Martinez, new mission parameters. We protect the federal asset and investigate potential command compromise. His words transformed the dynamic instantly, turning the SEAL team from Elena's potential captors into her protectors, though the implications of defying official orders hung heavy in the recycled cabin air. Victor Daniels recognized the shift immediately and began moving toward the front of the aircraft with practiced casualness, his cartel contractor training allowing him to blend with panicked passengers while positioning himself for optimal tactical advantage. Years of black operations had taught him that sometimes the cleanest solution involved eliminating multiple problems simultaneously. And Flight 447 now contained several individuals whose continued existence threatened his employer's interests. Dr. Marcus Webb's psychiatric instincts kicked into overdrive as he processed the escalating tension around him. If violence erupts in this pressurized cabin, people are going to die from more than just bullets, he called out with the authority of someone accustomed to emergency situations. Decompression, panic, medical emergencies. We need to consider civilian safety in whatever decisions are being made. Elena appreciated the doctor's intervention, but knew that their enemies had already factored civilian casualties into their calculations. Doctor, you're absolutely right, which is why the people behind this operation chose a commercial aircraft. They're counting on us being reluctant to take action that might endanger innocent passengers. Her tactical assessment carried the grim weight of someone who had learned to think like her enemies. Agent David Sterling made the calculated decision to blow his cover, standing and displaying his CIA credentials with practiced authority. Agent Sterling, Central Intelligence Agency. This aircraft is now under federal protection pending resolution of national security concerns. His intervention added legal complexity to what was already a volatile situation, though he knew his badge carried limited weight at 37,000 feet.
Judge Blackwood's connection to cartel money laundering networks had provided her with contingency plans for exactly this type of exposure risk. Her secure communication device buzzed with confirmation that air assets were being redirected to ensure that Flight 447 never reached its destination, with passengers capable of testifying about what they had witnessed. The judge's expression remained neutral, despite authorizing actions that would result in massive loss of life. Rachel Kim found her flight attendant training completely inadequate for the current circumstances, but her Air Force intelligence experience provided valuable perspective on battlefield triage. Whatever's about to happen, we need to identify exit strategies and medical priorities, she announced to passengers near her. Military personnel, law enforcement, medical staff, identify yourselves so we can coordinate if this situation deteriorates. The response to Rachel's call revealed a surprising number of passengers with relevant experience. Besides Dr. Webb and Detective Rodriguez, college student Amy Chen raised her hand and quietly identified herself as Army Reserve Intelligence, while teacher Robert Martinez revealed his background as former Navy communications specialist. The random collection of travelers was transforming into an impromptu tactical unit. Mark Thompson's electronic surveillance equipment detected incoming aircraft that weren't showing up on commercial radar frequencies. Commander, we've got military aircraft approaching from multiple vectors. Whatever's happening here, someone with serious authority is treating it as a major security incident.
His technical analysis provided confirmation of Elena's warnings about external forces. Jennifer Walsh's maternal instincts overrode her fear as she realized the magnitude of danger surrounding her son. "Tyler, we're going to play a new game called Airplane Hide and Seek," she whispered to the 6-year-old while quietly moving toward the rear of the cabin where emergency exits offered potential escape routes. Her civilian perspective reminded everyone that their actions would determine the fate of genuinely innocent people. Margaret Foster continued reading while her mind processed decades of DEA wife experience. "My Theodore always said the most dangerous operations were the ones where good agents got used by bad politicians," she observed with the detached clarity of advanced age. He'd have recognized this situation immediately. Honest warriors being manipulated by people who profit from their honor. Elena felt the weight of command responsibilities settling on her shoulders, despite her civilian clothes and years away from active duty. "Agent Sterling, I need you to document everything you're seeing and hearing. If this aircraft doesn't reach Miami, someone needs to ensure the truth survives." Her request acknowledged the possibility that they might not survive the next hour. Victor Daniels reached the forward galley area where aircraft vulnerability systems were accessible to someone with his specialized knowledge. His employers had provided him with technical specifications for disabling commercial aircraft in ways that would appear accidental, ensuring that any investigation would focus on mechanical failure rather than sabotage. The elimination of Flight 447 would solve multiple security problems simultaneously. Sergeant Lisa Martinez's medical training automatically assessed the passenger manifest for potential casualties and treatment priorities. "Ma'am, if hostile action is imminent, we need to establish medical protocols and identify passengers who might require immediate attention." Her clinical approach to battlefield medicine provided sobering reality about the stakes they were facing. Captain Hayes's communication with air traffic control had taken on increasingly urgent tones as she received contradictory instructions from multiple authorities. "Flight 447, you are ordered to divert to Homestead Air Reserve Base for immediate landing and passenger debriefing," came one transmission, followed immediately by another declaring, "Flight 447, maintain current heading to Miami International as scheduled." The conflicting orders revealed active disputes among controlling agencies. Elena recognized the communication pattern from her undercover experience. Captain, you're receiving orders from both legitimate authorities and compromised sources. The people who tried to kill me have infiltrated multiple government agencies. Her explanation provided context for the impossible situation facing the flight crew. Detective Rodriguez's law enforcement training had taught him to look for behavioral tells that indicated imminent violence, and he was seeing those signs in multiple passengers who hadn't identified themselves as potential threats. We've got at least 2 individuals aboard this aircraft who aren't who they claim to be, he announced with the confidence of 15 years of criminal investigation experience.
Air Marshal James Parker finally revealed his presence, displaying his credentials while maintaining tactical positioning that allowed him to monitor multiple suspects simultaneously. Federal Air Marshal Parker, I can confirm Detective Rodriguez's assessment. We have hostile actors among the passenger manifest. His professional validation added weight to growing concerns about infiltration. Sarah Collins's combat experience in asymmetrical warfare had taught her to recognize when missions were compromised by intelligence failures or deliberate deception. Ma'am, our original mission briefing contained information that should have been classified above our clearance level. Someone wanted us to find you specifically. Her analysis revealed layers of manipulation within their orders. Judge Blackwood realized that the situation was deteriorating beyond her ability to control through conventional channels. Her connection to the conspiracy that had orchestrated Elena's supposed death required decisive action to prevent exposure that would destroy careers and reveal illegal operations spanning multiple decades. The judge stood and began moving toward the aircraft's communication systems with purpose that suggested desperate measures. Agent Sterling intercepted Blackwood's movement with the instincts of someone trained to recognize judicial corruption. Your Honor, I'm going to need you to return to your seat while we resolve these security concerns. His polite but firm intervention carried the implicit threat of federal authority, though he knew that corrupt judges often had powerful protection. Elena watched the interaction between Sterling and Blackwood with growing understanding of the forces arrayed against them. Agent Sterling, Judge Blackwood signed the sealed orders that classified Operation Desert Phoenix and prevented investigation into cartel infiltration. She's not an innocent passenger. She's one of the people responsible for the cover-up. Her analysis revealed layers of manipulation within their orders. The revelation sent shockwaves through passengers who had assumed they were witnessing a case of mistaken identity rather than active conspiracy. Businessman David Chen's nervous energy suddenly made more sense as passengers realized that multiple people aboard the aircraft had hidden agendas and conflicting loyalties. Mark Thompson's surveillance equipment detected electronic jamming signals that indicated external forces were attempting to interfere with aircraft communications and navigation systems. Commander, someone's actively trying to interfere with our flight systems. If they succeed, this aircraft could be forced down or worse. His technical warning provided confirmation that Flight 447 had become the target of coordinated attack. Victor Daniels had reached the aircraft's electrical systems and began implementing sabotage protocols that would create cascading failures appearing to result from mechanical problems rather than hostile action. His cartel contractor training included expertise in making murders look like accidents, and eliminating an entire aircraft full of witnesses represented the ultimate expression of that skill set. Dr. Webb's medical training allowed him to recognize signs of poisoning when Victor Daniels suddenly collapsed near the forward galley, convulsing briefly before becoming still. He's been poisoned, he announced after a quick examination. Fast-acting neurotoxin, probably delivered through his communication device. The discovery revealed that the conspiracy included provisions for eliminating their own operatives when necessary. Elena's tactical assessment of Daniel's death provided grim confirmation of their enemy's ruthlessness. They just killed their own agent to prevent him from being captured and interrogated. That means they're prepared to eliminate this entire aircraft to protect their secrets. Her analysis left no doubt about the stakes they were facing. The death aboard the aircraft triggered immediate changes in passenger behavior as the reality of mortal danger became undeniable. Children began crying, adults moved protectively toward their families, and the artificial normalcy of commercial air travel evaporated completely in the face of life-or-death circumstances.
Commander Mitchell's leadership experience told him that decisive action was required before panic could compromise their tactical options. All military and law enforcement personnel were implementing emergency passenger protection protocols. Medical personnel established triage stations. Everyone else, follow crew instructions and prepare for potential emergency procedures. His orders provided structure in an increasingly chaotic situation. But even as Mitchell spoke, the aircraft systems began showing signs of the sabotage Victor Daniels had initiated before his death. Elena realized that their enemies had planned for contingencies that would ensure Flight 447's destruction, regardless of what happened to their operative aboard the aircraft. The aircraft's electrical systems began failing in cascading waves that set emergency lights flickering throughout the cabin while warning alarms echoed from the cockpit with increasing urgency. Captain Hayes' voice cut through the chaos with professional calm that couldn't quite mask her growing concern. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and remain calm while we address these issues. Elena knew immediately that Daniel's sabotage had been more sophisticated than simple mechanical failure. The pattern of cascading malfunctions was designed to create multiple system failures that would appear random while systematically compromising the aircraft's ability to maintain controlled flight. Her special operations training in aircraft vulnerabilities allowed her to recognize the signature of electronic warfare designed to eliminate witnesses while maintaining plausible deniability. First Officer Michael Santos struggled with flight controls that were becoming increasingly unresponsive as hydraulic systems began showing pressure loss indicators across multiple redundant networks. "Captain, we're losing primary and backup flight control systems simultaneously. This isn't normal mechanical failure. Someone has compromised our aircraft systems deliberately." His assessment confirmed what Elena had already suspected about their enemy's thoroughness. Mark Thompson's technical equipment detected the electronic signatures of the sabotage devices Daniels had installed before his death, revealing sophisticated interference patterns that were systematically destroying the aircraft's navigational and communication capabilities. "Commander, the sabotage is designed to make this look like catastrophic mechanical failure, but it's actually a coordinated electronic attack on multiple systems simultaneously." Dr. Webb organized his medical supplies while mentally preparing for the types of injuries that would result from emergency landing procedures or worse scenarios. "If we're going down, we need to prepare for impact trauma, potential fire, decompression injuries, and psychological shock among passengers who aren't trained for emergency situations." His clinical assessment provided sobering reality about their immediate medical needs. Judge Blackwood realized that her communication with conspirators had been compromised when her secure device began displaying error messages indicating external monitoring of her encrypted channels. The failure of her equipment meant she could no longer coordinate with outside forces, leaving her isolated aboard an aircraft where her role in the conspiracy was now known to multiple federal agents and military personnel. Air Marshal Parker positioned himself strategically to monitor both Judge Blackwood and any other passengers who might pose internal threats, while the aircraft systems continued their systematic failure. His federal law enforcement training had prepared him for hijacking scenarios and terrorist attacks, but the combination of internal sabotage and external conspiracy created tactical challenges beyond standard protocols. Agent Sterling activated emergency CIA communication protocols that bypassed normal channels, transmitting encrypted reports about the conspiracy directly to trusted contacts within the agency's internal security division. "This is Agent Sterling aboard Flight 447. We have confirmed evidence of cartel infiltration, judicial complicity, and active sabotage of a commercial aircraft, requesting immediate federal protection for witnesses and investigation of compromised federal operations." The turbulence that began shaking the aircraft felt different from normal atmospheric conditions, carrying the artificial rhythm of external interference with flight systems rather than natural weather patterns. Elena's combat experience in hostile environments allowed her to recognize when mechanical problems were being externally manipulated, and she realized their enemies were actively working to bring down Flight 447 from multiple directions simultaneously.
Rachel Kim's military intelligence training automatically shifted into battlefield triage mode as she began identifying passengers who would require immediate attention if the aircraft situation deteriorated further. Dr. Webb, we've got 2 elderly passengers with cardiac conditions, 1 diabetic child, and at least 4 adults who will need assistance with emergency procedures if we have to evacuate rapidly. Margaret Foster surprised everyone by revealing knowledge that contradicted her appearance as a harmless elderly passenger. My late husband's DEA files contain classified information about cartel operations in South America, including Operation Desert Phoenix. He kept copies hidden in our home because he suspected official records would be destroyed to protect guilty parties. Her revelation provided potential evidence that could survive even if Flight 447 didn't. Jennifer Walsh's protective instincts drove her to establish emergency procedures with other parents aboard the aircraft, creating informal networks to ensure children's safety, regardless of what happened to the adults around them. If something happens to us, make sure our children know they were loved and that we tried to do the right thing, she whispered to Dr. Webb while holding Tyler close. College student Amy Chen's Army Reserve intelligence training allowed her to recognize tactical movement patterns among passengers who were positioning themselves for potential conflict. Detective Rodriguez, we've got at least 2 more individuals who are moving like they have combat training, but they haven't identified themselves as friendlies. Her observation revealed additional complications in an already volatile situation. Teacher Robert Martinez's former Navy communications experience enabled him to interpret the electronic interference patterns affecting the aircraft systems. The jamming signals are coming from external sources, but they're being amplified by devices installed inside the aircraft. Someone coordinated internal sabotage with external electronic warfare to ensure maximum damage to our flight systems. Elena's leadership instincts took control as she realized that survival would require coordinating the diverse skills represented among Flight 447's passengers. We have combat veterans, law enforcement officers, medical personnel, and technical specialists aboard this aircraft. Our enemies are counting on us acting like helpless civilians, but we're going to prove them wrong by working together. The aircraft's autopilot system completely failed at that moment, forcing Captain Hayes and First Officer Santos to maintain manual control of an increasingly unstable aircraft while dealing with partial instrument failure and compromised flight control surfaces. The physical effort required to keep the plane airborne was becoming exhausting, and both pilots knew they couldn't maintain manual control indefinitely. Commander Mitchell's tactical assessment of their situation led him to a conclusion that would have seemed impossible an hour earlier. Ma'am, it appears that Flight 447 has become the primary target of a cartel operation designed to eliminate witnesses to federal infiltration. We need to treat this aircraft as a combat zone and implement defensive measures accordingly.
Sarah Collins's experience with improvised explosive devices allowed her to identify potential secondary sabotage systems that Daniels might have installed throughout the aircraft. If they're this thorough with electronic systems, they probably planted backup destruction methods that will activate if we manage to land safely. Her warning sent chills through passengers who realized their ordeal might not end with a successful emergency landing. Mark Thompson discovered that their communication difficulties were not entirely due to sabotage when his equipment detected friendly signals attempting to reach Flight 447 through the electronic interference. Commander, we're receiving encrypted communications from what appears to be legitimate federal sources. Someone is trying to establish contact despite the jamming efforts. The breakthrough in communications revealed that Agent Maria Santos, Elena's former DEA supervisor, had been monitoring federal intelligence channels and realized that Operation Desert Phoenix witnesses were being systematically eliminated.
Her encrypted message confirmed that friendly forces were attempting to provide assistance despite official orders that might be compromised by the same corruption affecting Elena's situation. Judge Blackwood made a desperate decision to eliminate the primary witness against her conspiracy by physically attacking Elena while the aircraft's instability provided cover for her actions. Years of comfortable corruption had not prepared her for hand-to-hand combat with a trained DEA agent, and her assault resulted in immediate intervention from multiple passengers with military and law enforcement backgrounds. Detective Rodriguez's law enforcement training allowed him to restrain Judge Blackwood without causing permanent injury, though the revelation that a federal judge was willing to commit murder aboard a commercial aircraft sent shockwaves through passengers who had retained faith in governmental institutions. Your Honor, you are under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and treason against the United States. Agent Sterling documented Judge Blackwood's attempted assault with his recording equipment while simultaneously coordinating with CIA contacts who were working to expose the broader conspiracy. We now have direct evidence of judicial corruption connected to cartel operations and witness elimination. The scope of this conspiracy extends to the highest levels of federal government. Dr. Webb treated minor injuries resulting from Judge Blackwood's attack, while his psychiatric training allowed him to recognize signs of psychological breakdown in passengers who were struggling to process the reality of governmental corruption and life-threatening danger simultaneously. We're dealing with civilian psychological trauma in addition to our physical safety concerns. The aircraft's hydraulic systems reached critical failure levels that forced Captain Hayes to declare an emergency landing situation, while external aircraft continued approaching Flight 447 with unknown intentions. The combination of internal sabotage, external threats, and passenger conflict had created a crisis that would test everyone's courage and determination in the minutes ahead. Elena realized that their survival depended not just on landing safely, but on ensuring that the evidence they carried reached trustworthy authorities who could act on the conspiracy they had uncovered. Agent Santos suggests we have allies on the ground, but we won't know if they can protect us until we're actually on the ground and able to identify who can be trusted. Lisa Martinez's medical assessment of their tactical situation included preparations for potential combat casualties if hostile forces attempted to eliminate witnesses after emergency landing. We need to assume that landing safely is only the beginning of our problems. These people have too much to lose to let us walk away with evidence of their crimes. The emergency landing approach began with aircraft systems failing faster than backup procedures could compensate, while external forces positioned themselves to ensure that Flight 447's passengers would not survive to testify about what they had discovered at 37,000 feet above the American coastline, where corruption had taken root in institutions meant to protect rather than exploit the people they served.
Homestead Air Reserve Base appeared through the cockpit windscreen like a fortress of concrete and steel, its runways stretching across Florida terrain, while emergency vehicles positioned themselves with flashing lights that painted the approaching dawn in reds and blues. Captain Jennifer Hayes' hands gripped the controls with determination as she fought to maintain approach angle despite hydraulic failures that made every control input a gamble against physics and failing machinery. Agent Maria Santos's encrypted transmission cut through the electronic interference with clarity that suggested military-grade communication equipment. Phoenix, this is Control 7. Be advised that Homestead has been compromised by hostile elements. Divert to alternate airfield coordinates. I'm transmitting now. Friendly ground forces are standing by to provide protection upon landing. Elena felt the familiar weight of command decisions as she processed Santos's warning and its implications for everyone aboard Flight 447. Captain, my former DEA supervisor is advising that our planned destination has been infiltrated by the same forces trying to eliminate us. We need to trust her alternative landing site if we want to survive what comes after touchdown. The coordinate data Santos transmitted revealed a smaller federal airfield in the Everglades that most passengers had never heard of, but Elena recognized it as a facility used for classified operations where trustworthy personnel could provide security without political interference. The change in destination would require flying further on damaged systems, but their alternatives had been systematically eliminated by enemies who had planned for multiple contingencies. Agent Sterling's CIA communication equipment finally connected with Deputy Director Karen Walsh's secure line, enabling him to transmit real-time updates about the conspiracy while documenting evidence that would survive regardless of Flight 447's fate. Director, we have confirmed judicial corruption, cartel infiltration, and active sabotage of federal aircraft. Request immediate federal marshals and internal affairs investigation at all levels. Dr. Webb organized passenger medical supplies while preparing for emergency landing injuries that would require immediate battlefield medicine techniques rather than conventional hospital procedures. His psychiatric training provided expertise in trauma treatment, but the combination of potential crash injuries and hostile ground forces would test skills he had never expected to use aboard a commercial aircraft. Mark Thompson's analysis of the sabotage devices revealed sophisticated engineering that suggested government-level resources rather than simple criminal activity. Commander, these devices were manufactured using specifications that are classified above my security clearance. Whoever built them had access to federal technology that shouldn't exist outside specific agencies. The revelation about classified technology confirmed Elena's suspicions about the scope of the conspiracy they were confronting. Thompson, the cartels involved in Operation Desert Phoenix had infiltrators who gave them access to experimental equipment. They've been using taxpayer-funded research to develop weapons for illegal operations. Margaret Foster produced a small memory device from her purse with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. My Theodore left detailed records of every meeting, every document, and every illegal order he witnessed during his DEA oversight responsibilities. This contains evidence that will destroy careers and put people in federal prison for life. The memory device represented more than just evidence. It was a comprehensive record of systemic corruption that extended far beyond Operation Desert Phoenix into other classified programs where cartels had exploited federal resources for private gain. Margaret's revelation transformed her from helpless elderly passenger into the keeper of information that could reshape American law enforcement policy. Air Marshal Parker established tactical coordination with the passenger volunteers who had military and law enforcement experience, creating an impromptu security team that could function during and after emergency landing procedures. If hostile forces are waiting on the ground, we need to be prepared for immediate defensive action the moment this aircraft stops moving. Teacher Robert Martinez's Navy communications background enabled him to monitor radio frequencies and detect the approach of aircraft that weren't part of normal air traffic control patterns. I'm picking up military helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft that are coordinating with ground units. Whatever's waiting for us involves significant federal assets. The external aircraft approaching Flight 447 split into two distinct groups as Agent Santos's allies attempted to establish protective corridors, while hostile forces maneuvered to intercept the damaged airliner before it could reach friendly territory. The sky around them became a complex battle space where friend and foe aircraft jockeyed for tactical advantage.
Elena's combat experience allowed her to interpret the aerial maneuvering patterns and understand that they were witnessing the beginning of actual confrontation between different factions within the American law enforcement establishment. We're not just dealing with corruption anymore. We're caught in the middle of what amounts to civil conflict within our own federal agencies. College student Amy Chen's military intelligence training enabled her to coordinate passenger security while preparing for potential ground combat situations that civilian training had never contemplated. Detective Rodriguez, we need to organize passengers into groups that can move quickly and follow tactical instructions if we come under fire after landing. Commander Mitchell's SEAL team established defensive positions throughout the aircraft cabin while maintaining readiness to protect passengers during both emergency landing and potential ground combat scenarios. Our mission has evolved from witness protection to active defense of civilians caught in hostile territory. Rachel Kim's dual experience as flight attendant and former Air Force intelligence allowed her to coordinate between civilian emergency procedures and military tactical requirements. Dr. Webb, we need to prepare medical stations that can function under combat conditions while treating both crash injuries and potential gunshot wounds. Captain Hayes' piloting skills were tested beyond normal training as she attempted to maintain controlled flight with multiple system failures while external aircraft created turbulence and electromagnetic interference that affected her remaining instruments. First Officer Santos, we're flying this approach manually with partial controls. Prepare passengers for emergency landing that may involve hostile ground conditions. The encrypted communications between Agent Santos and various federal units revealed that Flight 447 had become the focal point of a larger confrontation between reform-minded agents attempting to expose corruption and entrenched interests willing to use federal force to protect their illegal operations. The passengers had become witnesses to institutional breakdown at the highest levels. Agent Sterling documented every communication and tactical development while coordinating with CIA internal security investigators who were beginning parallel investigations into cartel infiltration based on his real-time reports. We're providing evidence of crimes in progress while they're happening. This documentation will be crucial for prosecutions if we survive. Detective Rodriguez's law enforcement experience with organized crime investigations allowed him to recognize patterns in the conspiracy that indicated years of systematic criminal activity rather than isolated incidents. This isn't just about covering up one operation. We're looking at ongoing criminal enterprise that has infiltrated multiple federal agencies. Sarah Collins's explosive ordnance disposal training enabled her to identify additional sabotage devices that Victor Daniels had concealed throughout the aircraft, including charges designed to explode during emergency landing procedures to eliminate survivors. Commander, we've got secondary explosives set to detonate on impact. We need to disarm them before touchdown, or the crash will kill everyone regardless of pilot skill. The discovery of additional explosives revealed the thoroughness of their enemy's planning and the extent to which they were willing to go to eliminate witnesses. Every system on Flight 447 had been compromised to ensure that passengers would not survive to testify about what they had discovered. Lisa Martinez's medical training allowed her to recognize signs of combat stress affecting passengers who were confronting the reality that their own government contained elements willing to murder civilians to protect criminal operations. We're dealing with psychological trauma that goes beyond normal emergency situations. People are losing faith in institutions they trusted. Jennifer Walsh's maternal instincts drove her to shield Tyler from the worst aspects of their situation while preparing the 6-year-old for emergency procedures that might separate them during landing or ground action. Sweetheart, if Mommy can't stay with you, follow the nice soldiers and doctors. They'll keep you safe until we can be together again. The approach to the alternate airfield revealed ground forces positioning themselves in patterns that suggested both protective and hostile elements were preparing for Flight 447's arrival. Federal vehicles, emergency equipment, and tactical teams created a complex landscape where identifying allies from enemies would be crucial for survival.
Elena realized that landing safely would only mark the beginning of a confrontation that would determine whether the evidence they carried could reach trustworthy authorities, or whether the conspiracy would succeed in eliminating everyone who had witnessed their criminal activities aboard a commercial aircraft that had become an unlikely battlefield in America's hidden war between justice and corruption.
Sarah Collins' explosive ordnance disarmament expertise guided her hands with surgical precision as she worked to disarm the impact-triggered charges Daniels had concealed beneath passenger seats. Each device designed to create maximum casualties during emergency landing procedures. The timer mechanism showed less than 6 minutes until touchdown, forcing her to disable multiple explosive devices while the aircraft bucked and shuddered through its final approach with failing hydraulics. "Commander, these charges are wired to pressure sensors that will detonate when landing gear impacts the runway," Collins reported, while carefully disconnecting trigger wires with steady hands, despite turbulence that threw her against cabin walls. "I can disable most of them, but we need passengers moved away from seats 20A through 23C immediately. Those devices are too sophisticated for field disarmament." Elena coordinated passenger evacuation from the targeted seating area while maintaining tactical awareness of external threats visible through aircraft windows. Federal vehicles surrounded the Everglades airfield in formations that suggested multiple factions preparing for confrontation, with some units displaying standard agency markings while others showed no identifying insignia that could distinguish friend from enemy forces. Dr. Webb established emergency medical stations near aircraft exits while preparing for casualties that would result from both crash impact and potential ground combat immediately following touchdown. His psychiatric expertise provided knowledge in trauma medicine, but treating patients while under enemy fire would require adapting hospital techniques to battlefield conditions beyond his civilian training. Agent Santos's radio transmissions provided tactical updates as friendly aircraft engaged hostile forces attempting to intercept Flight 447 during final approach. "Phoenix, hostile air assets have been neutralized, but ground situation remains fluid. Be prepared for immediate defensive action upon landing. My people are marked with green chemical lights for identification." The runway approach revealed emergency vehicles positioning themselves to assist with aircraft evacuation, while armed personnel established perimeters around the landing area. Mark Thompson's electronic surveillance detected encrypted communications between ground units that indicated complex command structures involving both legitimate federal personnel and cartel contractors operating under questionable authority. Captain Hayes fought to maintain landing approach angle as remaining flight control systems provided increasingly unreliable responses to her inputs. First Officer Santos, "We're coming in steep and fast with minimal flap control. Notify passengers to brace for hard landing with potential structural damage to aircraft integrity."
Agent Sterling transmitted final evidence packages to CIA headquarters while preparing for ground combat that would determine whether his investigation into cartel infiltration could proceed or would be terminated, along with everyone who had witnessed the conspiracy aboard Flight 447. His federal law enforcement training had not prepared him for scenarios where elements of his own government were actively trying to eliminate federal agents. The aircraft's main landing gear contacted the runway with tremendous force that sent shockwaves through the cabin, while Collins made final disconnections on explosive devices just seconds before impact triggers would have activated. Sparks flew from damaged electrical systems as the aircraft skidded along concrete with grinding metal sounds that indicated structural damage beyond normal emergency landing parameters. Air Marshal Parker coordinated with passenger volunteers to establish immediate exit priorities while monitoring radio frequencies that revealed ground forces moving to surround the aircraft with intentions that remained unclear until visual identification could determine which units represented rescue and which represented threat elimination. Margaret Foster clutched her husband's memory device while mentally preparing to transfer evidence to appropriate authorities if hostile forces succeeded in eliminating her before the truth could reach trustworthy investigators. Her decades as a DEA wife had taught her to recognize when institutional loyalty conflicted with moral duty, and she was prepared to sacrifice herself to ensure accountability for the crimes they had uncovered. The aircraft finally came to rest after sliding nearly 1,800 feet down the runway, with smoke rising from damaged engines and hydraulic fluid creating environmental hazards around the landing area. Emergency crews approached immediately, but their mixed composition of federal personnel, military units, and unidentified tactical teams created uncertainty about which responders could be trusted with witness protection. Elena's combat instincts activated as she assessed ground threats through aircraft windows, recognizing tactical movement patterns that indicated both protective and hostile forces were maneuvering for control of Flight 447's passengers. Commander Mitchell, we've got mixed ground forces with unclear loyalties. Some units are positioned for passenger protection, while others are establishing elimination positions. College student Amy Chen's military intelligence training enabled her to recognize standard federal tactical formations among some ground units while identifying irregular patterns among others that suggested cartel contractors rather than legitimate government forces. Detective Rodriguez, about half the ground personnel are following standard federal protocols, while the rest are using techniques that indicate mercenary operations. Teacher Robert Martinez's Navy communications background allowed him to monitor radio traffic that revealed competing command authorities attempting to control ground operations around Flight 447. I'm hearing conflicting orders from multiple agencies. Some units are being told to protect witnesses, while others are receiving elimination orders for the same people. The aircraft's emergency exits opened to reveal a complex tactical environment where federal marshals established protective corridors while unidentified gunmen positioned themselves to eliminate passengers before they could be evacuated to secure locations. The confrontation between legitimate law enforcement and corrupt elements would determine whether the evidence they carried could reach appropriate authorities. Commander Mitchell led his SEAL team through aircraft exits while maintaining protective formations around civilian passengers who had become witnesses to crimes at the highest levels of government. His military training had prepared him for combat against foreign enemies, but engaging potentially corrupt elements of his own federal system created moral conflicts that challenged everything he had sworn to protect. Dr. Webb treated passengers injured during the hard landing while preparing for potential combat casualties as gunfire erupted between federal agents attempting to establish witness protection and tactical teams working to eliminate everyone who had survived Flight 447's emergency landing. His medical oath required treating all casualties regardless of their affiliations, creating ethical dilemmas in a combat zone. Rachel Kim's experience as both flight attendant and former military intelligence enabled her to coordinate civilian evacuation procedures while adapting to battlefield conditions that civilian emergency training had never contemplated. Dr. Webb, we're treating landing injuries while under active gunfire. This is beyond normal emergency medical protocols. Mark Thompson's technical equipment detected jamming signals designed to prevent Flight 447's passengers from communicating with outside authorities, while ground forces battled for control of the witnesses and evidence that could expose decades of cartel infiltration and judicial complicity in illegal operations. Jennifer Walsh shielded her son Tyler while following evacuation procedures that led them toward federal agents displaying green identification lights that Agent Santos had specified as friendly forces. 6-year-old Tyler's questions about the soldiers and gunfire reflected innocent incomprehension of the institutional breakdown they were witnessing. Agent Sterling coordinated with federal marshals to establish evidence protection protocols while documenting the active conspiracy to eliminate witnesses that was unfolding in real time around the crashed aircraft. We have federal crimes in progress, including witness intimidation, conspiracy to commit murder, and treason by elements within our own government. Detective Rodriguez's law enforcement experience with organized crime investigations provided tactical knowledge for coordinating civilian protection with federal agents while hostile forces attempted to eliminate everyone who could testify about the conspiracy they had uncovered aboard Flight 447.
Air Marshal Parker established defensive positions with federal agents while coordinating passenger protection with SEAL team members who had made the moral decision to protect civilians rather than follow potentially compromised orders. We're dealing with a breakdown in command authority where legitimate law enforcement is fighting elements of our own criminal justice system.
Rachel Kim's battlefield intelligence training enabled her to assist Dr. Webb with trauma treatment while maintaining tactical awareness of the evolving combat situation around their makeshift medical station. "Doctor, we're treating federal agents and civilians while cartel mercenaries are actively trying to kill everyone we're trying to save. This is beyond normal emergency medicine." Detective Rodriguez continued coordinating civilian protection despite his arm wound, his law enforcement experience providing valuable tactical knowledge for urban combat scenarios that federal agents and military personnel approach differently. Marshal Barnes, these contractors are using police tactical techniques combined with military equipment. Someone trained them specifically for domestic operations. Teacher Robert Martinez's Navy communications background proved crucial as he monitored multiple radio frequencies and provided intelligence about contractor movements to federal agents establishing defensive perimeters. "I'm intercepting contractor communications that indicate they have backup elimination teams approaching from multiple directions. This is a coordinated military operation disguised as law enforcement action." The revelation that backup contractor teams were approaching the airfield forced immediate tactical decisions about whether to defend their current positions or attempt evacuation to more secure locations while under active fire from professional military personnel using government resources for illegal operations. College student Amy Chen's military intelligence training enabled her to coordinate passenger movement between defensive positions while helping federal agents identify potential threats among ground personnel whose loyalties remained uncertain. "Marshal Barnes, we've got unidentified tactical teams approaching from the southwest perimeter. They're not showing federal identification, but they're using standard military communication protocols." Jennifer Walsh shielded Tyler while following evacuation procedures that federal agents had established to protect civilian witnesses from elimination teams that showed no concern for innocent casualties. "Sweetheart, we're going to follow the nice federal agents to safety while the soldiers make sure the bad people can't hurt anyone," she whispered while her 6-year-old son asked questions that reflected childish incomprehension of institutional betrayal. Margaret Foster's combat engineering expertise proved vital as she identified additional explosive devices that contractors had positioned to eliminate federal witnesses if their direct assault failed to achieve complete elimination objectives. "Marshal Barnes, they've rigged multiple escape routes with remotely detonated charges. We're dealing with people who have planned for total witness elimination regardless of collateral damage." Lisa Martinez's medical training allowed her to treat casualties from both sides while maintaining professional neutrality, though the moral complexity of providing aid to people attempting to murder innocent civilians tested her oath beyond normal medical ethics. "Dr. Webb, some of these contractor casualties are asking for medical assistance while their colleagues continue trying to kill the people we're treating. The ethical dilemma of treating enemy casualties while under active fire from their associates created moral conflicts that challenged traditional medical and military codes of conduct in situations where institutional authority had broken down along moral rather than legal lines. Margaret Foster demonstrated remarkable courage by volunteering to transfer her husband's evidence to multiple federal agents rather than keeping all copies in one location, ensuring that the truth would survive even if cartel elimination teams succeeded in killing some witnesses. "Marshal Barnes, this evidence needs to reach trustworthy people in multiple agencies. Too many powerful criminals have too much to lose if this information becomes public." Commander Mitchell's SEAL team established overlapping fields of fire while coordinating with federal agents to create defensive positions that could protect civilian witnesses until air support could neutralize contractor teams operating with illegal government authority. "We're fighting elements of our own criminal justice system that have betrayed everything we swore to protect."
Lisa Martinez's medical training allowed her to treat combat casualties among both friendly and hostile forces while maintaining neutrality that her oath required, though the moral complexity of treating people who were attempting to murder innocent civilians tested her professional ethics beyond normal medical guidelines. Sarah Collins's combat engineering expertise proved crucial as she identified improvised explosive devices that hostile forces had positioned around the aircraft to eliminate survivors if their ground assault failed to achieve complete witness elimination.
Commander, they've rigged the area with secondary explosives. If we don't clear this perimeter immediately, everyone dies, regardless of who wins the firefight. The battle for control of Flight 447's passengers and evidence intensified as federal agents established defensive positions while cartel contractors attempted to complete their elimination mission despite unexpected resistance from legitimate law enforcement and military personnel who had chosen institutional loyalty over corrupt orders. Elena realized that their survival depended on reaching Agent Santos's protective forces while avoiding elimination by corrupt elements who had infiltrated multiple government agencies. The evidence Margaret Foster carried could destroy careers and send powerful people to federal prison, making everyone aboard Flight 447 a target for elimination by forces with unlimited resources and institutional authority. Federal Marshal Kevin Barnes emerged from an armored vehicle displaying the green identification lights Agent Santos had specified, his tactical vest marked with clear federal insignia as he established communication with Commander Mitchell's SEAL team. "We have secured transport standing by for witness protection, but hostile elements are attempting to prevent evacuation using lethal force. This airfield has become an active combat zone." Elena assessed the tactical situation with veteran eyes that recognized professional federal movement among the marshals while identifying the more aggressive patterns of cartel contractors who showed no concern for civilian casualties. "Marshal Barnes, the people trying to eliminate us have unlimited resources and government access. We need to assume they've infiltrated multiple agencies and plan for contingencies we haven't anticipated." Dr. Webb worked frantically to stabilize passengers injured during the firefight while federal agents provided covering fire against contractors attempting to advance on their medical station. "I need to extract shrapnel from Detective Rodriguez's arm, but these field conditions are testing the limits of emergency surgical procedures," he reported while working with instruments salvaged from aircraft emergency medical supplies. The memory device Margaret Foster protected had become the focal point of tactical maneuvering, as both sides recognized that the evidence it contained could destroy decades of systematic corruption involving cartel infiltration, federal judges, and law enforcement officials. Her position near the aircraft's rear exit made her vulnerable to sniper fire from contractors positioned on elevated ground around the airfield perimeter. Agent Sterling coordinated evidence protection protocols while simultaneously documenting the active conspiracy to eliminate federal witnesses that was unfolding in real time around Flight 447's wreckage. "Deputy Director Walsh, we have federal crimes in progress, including attempted murder of federal agents and civilian witnesses. The corruption extends beyond cartel contractors to active duty personnel following illegal elimination orders." Agent Santos's tactical radio provided real-time intelligence about hostile force movements while coordinating air support that could distinguish between legitimate federal personnel and cartel contractors operating under false government authority. "Phoenix, hostile sniper teams are positioning for elimination shots on primary evidence carriers. We need immediate relocation to hardened positions." Mark Thompson's electronic warfare equipment detected coordination signals between hostile ground forces and external command centers that were directing the elimination operation with sophisticated communication technology. "Commander, the contractors are receiving targeting updates from satellite surveillance and drone reconnaissance. They have real-time intelligence on our positions and movements." The tactical superiority of the hostile forces became apparent as they demonstrated access to military-grade equipment that shouldn't have been available to cartel contractors, including encrypted communication systems, advanced weaponry, and surveillance technology that indicated government-level resource allocation for their elimination mission.
Air Marshal Parker established defensive positions with federal agents while coordinating passenger protection with SEAL team members who had made the moral decision to protect civilians rather than follow potentially compromised orders. "We're dealing with a breakdown in command authority where legitimate law enforcement is fighting elements of our own criminal justice system." Rachel Kim's battlefield intelligence training enabled her to assist Dr. Webb with trauma treatment while maintaining tactical awareness of the evolving combat situation around their makeshift medical station. "Doctor, we're treating federal agents and civilians while cartel mercenaries are actively trying to kill everyone we're trying to save. This is beyond normal emergency medicine." Detective Rodriguez continued coordinating civilian protection despite his arm wound, his law enforcement experience providing valuable tactical knowledge for urban combat scenarios that federal agents and military personnel approach differently. Marshal Barnes, these contractors are using police tactical techniques combined with military equipment. Someone trained them specifically for domestic operations. Teacher Robert Martinez's Navy communications background proved crucial as he monitored multiple radio frequencies and provided intelligence about contractor movements to federal agents establishing defensive perimeters. I'm intercepting contractor communications that indicate they have backup elimination teams approaching from multiple directions. This is a coordinated military operation disguised as law enforcement action. The revelation that backup contractor teams were approaching the airfield forced immediate tactical decisions about whether to defend their current positions or attempt evacuation to more secure locations while under active fire from professional military personnel using government resources for illegal operations. College student Amy Chen's military intelligence training enabled her to coordinate passenger movement between defensive positions while helping federal agents identify potential threats among ground personnel whose loyalties remained uncertain. Marshal Barnes, we've got unidentified tactical teams approaching from the southwest perimeter. They're not showing federal identification, but they're using standard military communication protocols. Jennifer Walsh shielded Tyler while following evacuation procedures that federal agents had established to protect civilian witnesses from elimination teams that showed no concern for innocent casualties. Sweetheart, we're going to follow the nice federal agents to safety while the soldiers make sure the bad people can't hurt anyone, she whispered while her 6-year-old son asked questions that reflected childish incomprehension of institutional betrayal. Margaret Foster's combat engineering expertise proved vital as she identified additional explosive devices that contractors had positioned to eliminate federal witnesses if their direct assault failed to achieve complete elimination objectives. Marshal Barnes, they've rigged multiple escape routes with remotely detonated charges. We're dealing with people who have planned for total witness elimination regardless of collateral damage. Lisa Martinez's medical training allowed her to treat casualties from both sides while maintaining professional neutrality, though the moral complexity of providing aid to people attempting to murder innocent civilians tested her oath beyond normal medical ethics. Dr. Webb, some of these contractor casualties are asking for medical assistance while their colleagues continue trying to kill the people we're treating. The ethical dilemma of treating enemy casualties while under active fire from their associates created moral conflicts that challenged traditional medical and military codes of conduct in situations where institutional authority had broken down along moral rather than legal lines. Margaret Foster demonstrated remarkable courage by volunteering to transfer her husband's evidence to multiple federal agents rather than keeping all copies in one location, ensuring that the truth would survive even if cartel elimination teams succeeded in killing some witnesses. Marshal Barnes, this evidence needs to reach trustworthy people in multiple agencies. Too many powerful criminals have too much to lose if this information becomes public. Commander Mitchell's SEAL team established overlapping fields of fire while coordinating with federal agents to create defensive positions that could protect civilian witnesses until air support could neutralize contractor teams operating with illegal government authority. We're fighting elements of our own criminal justice system that have betrayed everything we swore to protect.
Elena's leadership experience enabled her to coordinate between military, law enforcement, medical, and civilian elements while maintaining tactical awareness of the broader conspiracy that had transformed a routine commercial flight into a battlefield where institutional loyalty conflicted with moral duty. Everyone aboard Flight 447 has become a target because we witnessed evidence of systematic corruption that threatens powerful people who control significant government resources. Agent Sterling established communication with CIA internal security investigators who were beginning parallel investigations into the conspiracy while documenting real-time evidence of federal crimes being committed by people with government authority. We're providing documentation of treason, conspiracy, and attempted murder by elements within our own law enforcement establishment.
The firefight intensified as contractor reinforcements arrived with heavier weapons, while federal agents requested military air support to neutralize hostile forces that were using government equipment for illegal operations against American citizens who had become witnesses to institutional corruption. Mark Thompson detected incoming aircraft with hostile electronic signatures that indicated contractor forces had access to military aviation assets, creating the possibility that the elimination operation included air support capabilities that could overwhelm federal ground forces attempting to protect Flight 447 survivors. The realization that contractors had aviation support forced immediate evacuation decisions, while federal agents coordinated with Agent Santos's air assets to establish protective air cover over the tactical situation that had evolved beyond normal law enforcement capabilities. Dr. Webb completed emergency surgery on Detective Rodriguez's arm wound while preparing for potential evacuation under fire as the tactical situation deteriorated beyond sustainable defensive positions around Flight 447's wreckage. We need to move wounded personnel to hardened positions before contractor air support arrives with elimination capabilities. Marshal Barnes coordinated with military transportation assets to establish secure evacuation corridors while maintaining defensive operations against contractor forces that demonstrated willingness to engage federal law enforcement with lethal force to prevent witness testimony about systematic government corruption. The roar of approaching helicopters split the Florida morning air as Agent Santos's voice crackled through secure communications with urgent tactical updates. Federal ground units, hostile aircraft approaching from multiple vectors with elimination authorization. My air assets are engaging, but we need immediate hard cover for witness protection. These people have unlimited resources and government backing. Elena recognized the distinctive sound signatures of military helicopters, configured for close air support, their weapon systems capable of eliminating entire ground units within minutes. Her special operations experience provided grim understanding of their tactical situation. Federal agents with small arms and basic protective equipment facing military aviation assets equipped for destroying hardened targets. Agent Sterling transmitted final evidence packages to CIA headquarters while coordinating with federal marshals to establish hardened defensive positions that could survive air attack. Deputy Director Walsh, hostile aircraft are approaching with lethal authorization against federal witnesses. The conspiracy includes access to military aviation for domestic elimination operations. Dr. Webb completed emergency treatment of Detective Rodriguez's arm wound while preparing medical supplies for transport to underground positions where federal agents were establishing protective bunkers. We need to evacuate wounded personnel immediately. These field medical stations won't survive if those helicopters have anti-personnel weapons. Federal Marshal Barnes coordinated with SEAL team members to establish defensive positions in aircraft maintenance facilities that provided concrete protection against air attack while maintaining communication with Agent Santos's support aircraft. Commander Mitchell, we're relocating to hardened positions in Hangar 3. Can your people provide covering fire during civilian evacuation?
The tactical movement of 89 passengers and crew from Flight 447 required coordination between military, law enforcement, and medical personnel while under threat from aviation assets that could eliminate exposed personnel with precision weapon systems. Rachel Kim's experience with battlefield casualty evacuation proved crucial as she assisted Dr. Webb with moving wounded personnel while federal agents provided covering fire against contractor forces attempting to prevent civilian evacuation to protected positions. Mark Thompson's electronic warfare equipment detected targeting systems from approaching aircraft that indicated sophisticated surveillance technology focused on identifying specific individuals rather than conducting area bombardment. Marshal Barnes, they're using precision targeting systems to identify primary witnesses. This isn't random elimination. They're hunting specific people.
The revelation that contractor aircraft were conducting targeted elimination operations rather than area destruction provided tactical advantages for federal defenders who could use concealment and misdirection rather than relying solely on hardened protection against overwhelming firepower. Margaret Foster demonstrated remarkable composure while transferring copies of her husband's classified evidence to federal agents, military personnel, and CIA representatives who would ensure the truth survived regardless of individual casualties. Agent Foster spent 40 years documenting corruption because he knew someday honest people would need this information to restore institutional integrity. College student Amy Chen's military intelligence training enabled her to coordinate perimeter security while federal agents established communication with external law enforcement agencies that were beginning investigations into the systematic corruption Flight 447's passengers had uncovered. Marshal Barnes, I'm monitoring police frequencies that indicate federal investigations are expanding beyond cartel contractors to include judicial corruption. The expanding federal investigation created strategic implications for the contractor elimination operation, as killing Flight 447's witnesses would no longer prevent exposure of the conspiracy that had grown beyond the ability of any single operation to contain through violence and intimidation. Air Marshal Parker established tactical coordination with Agent Santos's air support while maintaining defensive operations against contractor ground forces that continued attempting to advance on federal protective positions. We're dealing with a breakdown in institutional authority where cartel contractors are using government resources to wage war against federal law enforcement. The institutional breakdown represented by cartel military contractors engaging federal agents with military weapons created constitutional crisis implications that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation around Flight 447's wreckage and the Everglades airfield where American citizens had become targets of their own government's resources. Teacher Robert Martinez's Navy communications experience proved invaluable as he monitored contractor radio traffic and provided intelligence about aircraft approach vectors to federal agents coordinating defensive operations. Marshal Barnes, contractor aircraft are splitting into attack formations designed for precision elimination rather than area bombardment. They're planning surgical strikes on specific targets. Commander Mitchell's SEAL team established overlapping defensive positions while coordinating with federal agents to create tactical scenarios where contractor aircraft would face crossfire from multiple directions if they attempted close approach for precision targeting operations. Jennifer Walsh continued protecting 6-year-old Tyler while following federal evacuation procedures that led them toward underground positions where civilian witnesses could survive air attack. "Mommy, why are the helicopters trying to hurt the nice federal agents?" Tyler asked with innocent confusion about institutional conflicts that challenged adult understanding.
The child's question reflected the moral clarity that adults had lost through exposure to institutional corruption and government breakdown, reminding everyone fighting for survival that they were protecting not just evidence and witnesses, but the fundamental principles that democracy required to function. Sarah Collins's explosive ordnance expertise enabled her to identify contractor munitions being deployed by aircraft systems, including precision-guided weapons that indicated access to advanced military technology supposedly restricted to legitimate defense operations. Marshal Barnes, they're using weapon systems that require special authorization from the Pentagon. Someone with significant authority is backing this elimination operation. Lisa Martinez's medical training allowed her to establish trauma treatment protocols in underground positions while preparing for casualties that would result from air attack against federal defensive positions. Dr. Webb, we're treating combat injuries in conditions that exceed normal emergency medical capabilities. This situation has evolved beyond civilian emergency response.
Agent Sterling coordinated evidence protection with federal marshals while documenting contractor use of military aviation against American citizens, creating real-time records of domestic terrorism being conducted by cartel contractors with apparent government backing. Detective Rodriguez provided tactical advice based on his law enforcement experience with organized crime investigations while recovering from his arm wound in underground positions where federal agents had established witness protection operations. Marshal Barnes, the scope of this conspiracy suggests coordination at levels that include Pentagon authorization for domestic military operations. Elena's combat leadership experience enabled her to coordinate between diverse groups of military, law enforcement, medical, and civilian personnel while maintaining tactical awareness of the broader implications of their situation. Everyone needs to understand that we're not just fighting for our own survival. We're fighting to preserve institutional integrity against corruption that threatens the foundation of democratic government. Dr. Webb established underground medical stations while coordinating with federal agents to ensure that wounded personnel could receive adequate treatment despite the tactical constraints imposed by contractor air attack capabilities. The sound of approaching aircraft intensified as Agent Santos's support helicopters engaged contractor aviation in aerial combat that would determine whether federal ground forces could maintain defensive positions long enough for evidence to reach trustworthy authorities. Mark Thompson detected electronic jamming attempts designed to prevent federal agents from communicating with external law enforcement agencies, while contractor aircraft positioned themselves for elimination strikes against underground defensive positions. Federal Marshal Barnes established communication with FBI headquarters while coordinating tactical operations that had evolved from simple witness protection into active defense against domestic terrorism conducted by cartel contractors using government resources. The aerial engagement between Agent Santos's aircraft and contractor helicopters created a complex tactical environment where federal ground forces had to maintain defensive operations while friendly and hostile aviation assets conducted combat operations directly overhead. Rachel Kim's military intelligence experience proved crucial as she assisted Dr. Webb with treating casualties from the ongoing firefight while preparing for potential air attack casualties that would require battlefield medicine techniques in underground protective positions. Air Marshal Parker coordinated with federal agents to establish communication with external military commands that were beginning investigations into unauthorized use of military aviation assets for domestic operations against American citizens. The revelation that multiple Pentagon commands were investigating unauthorized military operations created strategic advantages for federal defenders as contractor elimination operations faced increasing scrutiny from legitimate military oversight. Elena realized that their tactical situation had evolved beyond simple survival toward strategic implications for institutional reform, as the evidence they protected could expose systematic corruption that threatened democratic government at fundamental levels. Agent Santos's radio transmission provided crucial intelligence about the broader tactical situation, while her aircraft continued engaging contractor aviation in aerial combat that would determine the immediate outcome of ground operations. Federal ground units, hostile aircraft are withdrawing due to external military pressure. Contractor operations are being investigated by Pentagon oversight. Maintain defensive positions until federal reinforcements arrive. The withdrawal of contractor aircraft marked a turning point in the tactical situation, though federal agents maintained defensive operations while external investigations expanded into the systematic corruption that Flight 447's passengers had exposed through their survival and testimony. Federal reinforcements arrived at the Everglades airfield with the methodical precision of legitimate law enforcement operations, their vehicles displaying proper identification and their personnel following established protocols that contrasted sharply with the irregular tactics contractor forces had employed during their elimination attempts.
FBI Deputy Director Karen Walsh stepped from an armored command vehicle with the bearing of someone prepared to restore institutional order through proper legal channels. Elena emerged from underground protective positions with the cautious awareness of someone who had learned to distinguish between genuine federal authority and the corrupted elements that had infiltrated government agencies. Deputy Director Walsh, we have extensive evidence of systematic corruption involving cartel infiltration, federal judges, and law enforcement officials who have been using government resources for illegal operations spanning multiple decades. Agent Sterling provided comprehensive briefings to Deputy Director Walsh while coordinating evidence transfer with federal marshals who had established secure processing stations for the classified materials Margaret Foster had protected throughout their ordeal. Ma'am, we have documented real-time conspiracy to eliminate federal witnesses, including attempted murder of civilians and law enforcement personnel by cartel contractors operating under apparent government authorization. The evidence processing revealed scope of corruption that exceeded initial FBI estimates, with Margaret Foster's memory device containing detailed records of meetings, financial transactions, and operational orders that implicated officials at the highest levels of law enforcement and judicial hierarchies. Deputy Director Walsh's expression reflected grim understanding of the institutional damage that would result from public exposure of such systematic betrayal. Dr. Webb continued treating casualties in established medical stations while coordinating with federal emergency medical personnel who had arrived with professional equipment and proper protocols. We've treated combat injuries, emergency landing trauma, and psychological stress reactions among civilians who witnessed institutional breakdown at levels they never imagined possible. Federal Marshal Barnes coordinated witness protection protocols with FBI agents while ensuring that Flight 447's passengers received appropriate medical attention and psychological support for trauma that extended beyond physical injuries to fundamental challenges to their understanding of governmental integrity. Deputy Director Walsh, these witnesses have experienced direct attacks by elements of their own government. Their testimony will require extraordinary protection measures. Agent Santos landed at the airfield in her command helicopter with the satisfaction of someone whose loyalty to constitutional principles had been vindicated through successful protection of civilians against corrupt elements within her own law enforcement hierarchy. Phoenix, FBI oversight has initiated criminal investigations into unauthorized military operations and misuse of federal assets for domestic elimination missions. The FBI investigations represented institutional accountability mechanisms that had been activated by evidence from Flight 447, creating momentum for systemic reform that could prevent similar corruption from threatening democratic institutions in the future. Elena felt the weight of unfinished responsibilities being transferred to proper authorities who could pursue justice through legal rather than violent means. Detective Rodriguez received professional medical treatment for his arm wound while providing detailed statements to federal investigators about the conspiracy he had witnessed during what was supposed to be a peaceful vacation flight. Deputy Director Walsh, my law enforcement experience tells me this corruption extends into multiple agencies and requires investigation at levels that exceed normal criminal justice procedures. Mark Thompson's technical analysis of contractor equipment revealed sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities that indicated access to classified federal technology through illegal channels, providing federal investigators with evidence of technology transfer violations that carried severe criminal penalties under federal law. Teacher Robert Martinez's intelligence about contractor communications provided federal investigators with intercepted transmissions that documented coordination between cartel contractors and corrupt government officials, creating prosecutable evidence of conspiracy and treason that would support criminal cases against high-level defendants. College student Amy Chen's military intelligence experience enabled her to provide detailed tactical analysis of contractor operations to federal investigators who were building criminal cases against cartel organizations that had engaged in domestic terrorism using government resources. Rachel Kim's dual perspective as civilian flight attendant and former military intelligence provided unique insights into the institutional breakdown that had transformed a routine commercial flight into a battlefield where private interests had used government authority against American citizens. Jennifer Walsh held 6-year-old Tyler while speaking with federal child protection specialists who were ensuring that civilian witnesses received appropriate support for trauma that would require ongoing psychological care. My son shouldn't have to learn about government corruption at his age, but he's going to need help understanding what he witnessed. The child protection protocols reflected federal recognition that Flight 447's ordeal had created long-term consequences for innocent civilians who would require institutional support to process trauma and maintain faith in democratic government despite witnessing its failures. Air Marshal Parker coordinated with federal aviation security officials to establish new protocols for protecting commercial aircraft from the type of systematic infiltration and sabotage that had nearly destroyed Flight 447 and eliminated its passengers to protect criminal conspiracies. Sarah Collins's explosive ordnance analysis provided federal investigators with detailed technical evidence about sophisticated sabotage devices that required government-level resources to manufacture and deploy, supporting criminal cases against contractors who had violated federal laws governing weapons and explosives. Lisa Martinez's medical documentation of casualties provided federal prosecutors with evidence of attempted murder and assault charges against contractor personnel who had engaged in combat operations against American civilians and law enforcement officers on domestic soil. Agent Sterling established coordination with CIA internal security investigators who were expanding their investigation beyond cartel contractors to include federal judges, law enforcement officials, and other government personnel who had participated in or facilitated systematic corruption spanning multiple agencies. Margaret Foster transferred complete copies of her husband's classified evidence to federal prosecutors while retaining backup copies with trusted family members who could ensure the truth would survive regardless of future intimidation attempts by remaining corrupt elements. Commander Mitchell's SEAL team established debriefing protocols with Pentagon investigators while facing internal military justice proceedings for their decision to protect civilians against orders that may have been compromised by the same corruption they had helped expose. The institutional conflicts faced by military personnel who had chosen constitutional principles over potentially illegal orders reflected broader challenges to military discipline and civilian oversight that would require careful resolution through proper legal channels. Deputy Director Walsh established federal task force operations to investigate the full scope of corruption revealed through Flight 447's ordeal, while ensuring that witnesses received ongoing protection from remaining elements of the conspiracy that might attempt future elimination efforts. Elena found herself at the center of federal investigations that would reshape cartel infiltration oversight and judicial accountability, with her survival and testimony providing crucial evidence for prosecutions that could restore public faith in democratic institutions. The media attention surrounding Flight 447's emergency landing and subsequent federal investigations created public awareness of corruption issues that had previously remained hidden within classified programs, generating political pressure for transparency and reform. Congressional oversight committees announced investigations into cartel infiltration operations and judicial oversight failures revealed through evidence from Flight 447, creating legislative momentum for systemic reforms that could prevent similar corruption in the future. Federal prosecutors began preparing criminal cases against dozens of defendants involved in the conspiracy, with charges ranging from corruption and conspiracy to treason and attempted murder, representing the largest prosecution of government corruption in decades.
Elena realized that her survival had transformed her from a hidden federal agent trying to heal from invisible wounds into a key witness whose testimony would be crucial for prosecutions that could determine whether democratic institutions could be restored or would continue deteriorating under corrupt influences. Dr. Webb coordinated with federal medical personnel to ensure that all Flight 447 passengers received appropriate follow-up care for both physical injuries and psychological trauma that would require ongoing treatment to help them process their experience of institutional betrayal. The psychological impact of witnessing government corruption extended beyond immediate trauma to fundamental questions about democratic institutions and citizen trust that would require careful handling by mental health professionals trained in political trauma. Federal Protection Services established long-term security protocols for Flight 447 witnesses while investigations and prosecutions proceeded, recognizing that the conspiracy's scope meant that remaining corrupt elements might attempt future intimidation or elimination efforts. Mark Thompson's technical expertise proved valuable for federal cybersecurity investigations into cartel infiltration of government communication systems and electronic surveillance capabilities that had enabled the conspiracy to operate across multiple agencies. The scope of institutional damage revealed through Flight 447's evidence required comprehensive reform efforts that would extend far beyond criminal prosecutions to include systemic changes in oversight, accountability, and transparency mechanisms designed to prevent similar corruption from developing in the future. 6 months after Flight 447's emergency landing transformed a routine commercial flight into a catalyst for institutional reform, Elena Sofia Martinez stood before the Senate Judiciary Committee in a hearing room packed with journalists, law enforcement officials, and citizens who had followed the corruption scandal that reshaped American understanding of cartel infiltration and judicial accountability. The hearing room's formal atmosphere contrasted sharply with the chaos aboard Flight 447, but Elena felt the same sense of purpose that had sustained her through undercover work in Colombia and civilian life in Denver. Her testimony would conclude months of investigations that had resulted in 63 federal indictments, including Judge Patricia Blackwood, whose corruption had enabled years of illegal cartel operations. Senator Williams, the corruption we uncovered aboard Flight 447 represents systematic betrayal of public trust by individuals who used government authority for cartel profit while endangering national security. Elena testified that the steady confidence of someone whose survival had given meaning to institutional reform efforts that would protect future generations from similar abuse. Congressional oversight had revealed that Operation Desert Phoenix was merely one example of cartel infiltration that had infected multiple law enforcement programs, with Margaret Foster's evidence providing prosecutors with documentation spanning 12 years of illegal operations that had cost taxpayers millions of dollars while compromising operational security. Dr. Webb had returned to his forensic psychiatry practice with renewed appreciation for institutional integrity after witnessing how corruption could threaten innocent civilians. His medical testimony about treating combat casualties aboard a commercial aircraft had provided compelling evidence for congressional reforms requiring stricter oversight of cartel infiltration on domestic soil. Federal prosecutors had secured convictions against 47 defendants in what became known as the Flight 447 conspiracy, with sentences ranging from 20 years to life imprisonment for crimes including treason, conspiracy, attempted murder, and corruption. Judge Blackwood received life imprisonment without parole for her role in orchestrating witness elimination operations using federal authority. Agent Sterling received promotion to CIA Deputy Director while leading expanded investigations into government corruption that had been inspired by evidence from Flight 447. His professional vindication provided institutional recognition that whistleblower protection was essential for maintaining democratic accountability within federal agencies.
Commander Mitchell and his SEAL team received commendations for choosing constitutional principles over potentially illegal orders, with their actions aboard Flight 447 becoming case study material for military ethics training programs designed to prepare service members for situations where institutional loyalty conflicted with moral duty. Agent Santos's decision to provide air support for civilian protection against corrupt cartel contractors earned her assignment to FBI oversight positions where her experience could help prevent similar institutional breakdown in the future. Her protection of Flight 447's passengers demonstrated that law enforcement honor required defending citizens against enemies, both foreign and domestic. Detective Rodriguez returned to Miami with enhanced appreciation for federal cooperation in complex criminal investigations. Though his vacation had been permanently altered by witnessing institutional corruption at levels that challenged his faith in government, his law enforcement testimony had provided crucial evidence for prosecutions that restored some public confidence in criminal justice systems. Rachel Kim continued her flight attendant career while serving as aviation industry consultant for new federal security protocols designed to prevent infiltration and sabotage of commercial aircraft by cartel contractors or other hostile actors seeking to eliminate witnesses or compromise transportation security. Mark Thompson's technical expertise led to assignment with federal cybersecurity operations focused on preventing cartel infiltration of government communication systems, with his analysis of Flight 447's electronic sabotage contributing to enhanced protection for critical infrastructure against similar attacks. Dr. Webb established a foundation providing medical treatment for federal agents suffering from trauma related to cartel infiltration, with Elena serving on the board of directors while continuing her work as a federal prosecutor in Denver, where her survival story had inspired community support for law enforcement services.
Jennifer Walsh and 6-year-old Tyler received ongoing federal protection while Jennifer testified in trials related to Flight 447 conspiracy prosecutions. Tyler's innocent questions about institutional corruption had reminded adults that democratic government required protection of fundamental principles that children understood instinctively. Teacher Robert Martinez returned to classroom education with enhanced curriculum about civic responsibility and institutional integrity, using his Flight 447 experience to teach students about the importance of citizen vigilance in protecting democratic institutions from corruption and abuse of authority. College student Amy Chen graduated with honors while pursuing federal law enforcement career focused on preventing cartel infiltration within government operations, with her Flight 447 experience providing practical knowledge about institutional breakdown that would guide her professional development. Air Marshal Parker received assignment to federal aviation security oversight while developing new protocols for protecting commercial aircraft from the type of systematic infiltration that had nearly destroyed Flight 447 and eliminated its passengers to protect criminal conspiracies. Sarah Collins' explosive ordnance expertise led to federal employment investigating cartel technology transfer violations, with her analysis of Flight 447's sabotage devices providing crucial evidence for prosecutions that prevented similar weapons from being used against American civilians in the future. Lisa Martinez continued her Navy medical career while serving as consultant for federal emergency response protocols designed to treat casualties resulting from domestic terrorism or institutional conflicts that threatened civilian populations on American soil. Margaret Foster received federal recognition for her courage in preserving classified evidence that enabled prosecutions of government corruption, with her late husband's documentation becoming the foundation for institutional reforms that would protect future generations from similar betrayal of public trust. The Flight 447 Memorial Foundation, established with congressional support, provided ongoing assistance for victims of government corruption while promoting transparency and accountability measures designed to prevent institutional breakdown that threatened democratic government.
Elena's return to Denver had been transformed by national recognition of her role in exposing corruption, but she chose to continue her quiet work as a federal prosecutor while serving as living proof that ordinary citizens could defend democratic institutions against powerful corrupt interests. The small city of Denver had embraced Elena as a local hero while maintaining the professional atmosphere that had originally attracted her after years of undercover service. Her colleagues understood that true heroism often involved quiet service rather than public recognition, though her survival had protected institutions they all depended upon. Pastor Michael Rodriguez's church services included prayers for institutional integrity and citizen courage, with Elena's experience serving as inspiration for community discussions about civic responsibility and the importance of defending democratic principles even when facing overwhelming opposition from corrupt authority. Her neighbor, Sarah Johnson, continued her morning routine while taking pride in Elena's courage, though she recognized that Elena's peaceful career had been permanently altered by her unwilling involvement in exposing corruption that threatened fundamental democratic institutions. The federal prosecutor's office in Denver established new programs for treating trauma related to institutional betrayal, with Elena's experience highlighting the need for specialized care for federal employees who discovered that some of the institutions they had served had been compromised by corruption and criminal activity. Federal legislation inspired by Flight 447 investigations established enhanced oversight mechanisms for cartel infiltration, while strengthening whistleblower protections and transparency requirements designed to prevent systematic corruption from developing within government agencies responsible for national security. Supreme Court decisions related to Flight 447 prosecutions clarified constitutional principles regarding civilian oversight of law enforcement operations, while establishing precedent for citizen protection against government authority being used for criminal purposes rather than legitimate public security needs. International attention focused on American institutional reforms inspired by Flight 447 had enhanced global confidence in democratic accountability mechanisms while demonstrating that citizen courage could overcome corruption even when it involved powerful interests with government authority and unlimited resources. Elena's testimony before congressional committees had concluded with simple words that captured the essence of her experience and its implications for democratic government. Flight 447 taught me that ordinary citizens have extraordinary power to protect democratic institutions when they choose courage over comfort and truth over convenience. The Senate hearing room had erupted in sustained applause as senators, journalists, and citizens recognized that Elena's survival had protected more than individual lives. It had preserved institutional integrity that democracy required to function effectively in serving the people rather than corrupt private interests.
As Elena walked from the Capitol building into Washington, D.C.'s sunshine, she felt the satisfaction of duties completed and justice served, though she knew that protecting democratic institutions required ongoing vigilance from citizens who understood that freedom was never guaranteed, but always required active defense against corruption and abuse. The return flight to Denver would be her first commercial flight since Flight 447, but Elena approached air travel with renewed confidence in institutional protections that had been strengthened through the courage of ordinary people who had chosen to stand against corruption when it threatened everything they valued about American democracy. Agent Sterling accompanied Elena on the return flight as both protection and friendship, their shared experience aboard Flight 447 having created bonds that transcended professional relationships while demonstrating that institutional reform require cooperation between citizens and government officials committed to serving the public interest.
The aircraft cabin held familiar sounds of engines humming, passengers conversing, and flight attendants providing routine service. But Elena's experience had transformed her understanding of how quickly normal situations could become extraordinary tests of character and courage when citizens faced threats to fundamental democratic principles. As the plane lifted off from Washington, with Elena seated by the window in row 6, she reflected on how a simple nap during what should have been a routine flight had led to experiences that demonstrated the power of ordinary citizens to protect extraordinary institutions when they chose courage over fear and truth over deception. The clouds below looked the same as they had 6 months earlier, but Elena's perspective had been forever changed by learning that her survival could serve purposes larger than her own healing, and that sometimes the greatest service involved standing up to corruption, regardless of personal cost or institutional pressure. Flight 447's legacy would continue through reformed institutions, prosecuted criminals, and protected citizens who understood that democracy required active participation rather than passive trust in authority, with Elena's courage inspiring future generations to defend freedom against those who would abuse power for private gain. The aircraft descended toward Denver with the setting sun painting golden light across Colorado mountains, where Elena would continue her quiet work as a federal prosecutor, while knowing that her survival had protected democratic institutions for all Americans who deserved government that served the people rather than corrupt private interests that threatened the very foundation of constitutional democracy.